Good morning, Chair Khalil Brankesh, member of the committee. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and allow me also to say congratulations to the HOD for her appointment and also greet her and the rest of the staff. And my name is Mbulelo Isaac Sileko. I'm a member of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Members online, do we have any members online who'd like to introduce themselves?
Chairperson, good morning, Chairperson, members and officials. Unfortunately, we do not have members online. Member Nkondlo indicated that she will join online, and she's running a little bit late, and she will, she will join online until she gets into the meeting, and there is an apology from the Honourable Minister, Chairperson, just for noting. Thank you.
Yes, the apology is noted. And I was just wanting to ask of you today if we could just have a moment of silence for the family during this time. We'll just have that moment now. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we'll hand over to HOD just to introduce the department briefly. Then from there, we can start with the rest of the program.
reprioritizing and savings in order to make good. So the budget that we bring before the committee today, just in terms of our strategic approach, we've started off on our journey in terms of governance for results, and we're looking at ultimately reaching our vision in terms of coordinated service delivery for the citizen, with a particular focus for this year, the last year of the current strategic plan, Provincial Treasury as an enabler and a reliable partner. But having said that, our ability to be an enabler and a reliable partner requires of us to think innovatively, and hence we then look at two aspects that we said we're not going to compromise on, even with the constraints that we're facing, and that is investment in people. And not necessarily the filling of all our vacancies or our critical list had to be reduced, but also then looking at innovative ways in which we can continue to deliver our services. So in terms of our priorities, our strategic priorities, it remains intact. We're talking integrated provincial governance, we're talking effective local governance. Our focus area is strategic supply chain management, as well as efficient infrastructure investment, and our levers remain our capacity building initiatives, drawing from ICT and technology, as well as our knowledge management system. So those remain. We are not deviating from that. And so with that, Chair, our budget for our 3-year budget allocation is then 339.7 million to 344 million in 25-26, and then ultimately 358 million in the outer year. I think, Chair, if that's you, I can expand, but I think I'm going to stop there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Welcome, Member Nkondlo. So members, I will now table the bill in its entirety, or the vote in its entirety. If you could please indicate whether you have any questions. I see Member van der Westhuizen, and let's keep it in rounds of 3. We can come back if there are further questions. Member van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the budget that's been tabled. Before we get to the figures, Chair, I would like to ask just a few general questions that speak to the budget eventually. And the first one is the whole issue of demographics and the census. As we all know, we've received numerous complaints of people that felt that they were not counted in 2022. We do know that impacts on the formula for the distribution of I think, equitable funds and so. And at one stage, the Western Cape even considered, I think, disputing it, or going to the intergovernmental, route to just get some clarity on that regard. So perhaps if you could just give us some indication of that, and what are the views of the national provincial treasury on the availability and the reliability of census data. I've also heard from the minister that, although we have the high level data, some of the can I call it lower layers of data, which I believe is so important for social support and all kinds of other interventions, that may have not been available by the time that this was drafted. So perhaps if you could just give us some clarity in that regard. The second one is then also the formula itself. I do know that we were informed that there is a continuous review of that formula, and perhaps if you could just explain to us where that debate currently stands. And then, Chair, in terms of local government, I always find it very interesting that there are more than one provincial department that has got the mandate to oversee local government, being the Department of Local Government, but then also Treasury has a big role to play. And I've raised this in the past that, you know, a big municipality, they've got all the resources to report on a monthly basis in terms of their spending, their collection rates, and the numerous other data points that you require. To what extent have we been able to lessen the task or the burden on municipalities to provide such information? Do we have an integrated system, or does our system of data collection integrate with the various municipal finance systems that we see in the province, so that there is not a duplication, because they not only need to report to Treasury, they also report to local government, they also report, I believe, to COCTA and so on. So please, if we could just get an indication of progress to make it easier, particularly for our smaller and already struggling municipalities to report on a regular basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. Any further questions? Member Nkondlo?
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the HOD and her team. My questions, the Chair, maybe following on the initial ones about the general matters. I just want to understand how Treasury is working. I understand the fiscal futures setup is in the Premier's office, isn't it? I'm not sure whether I'm getting it right. If not, please explain, because I wanted to understand how then is the interface between Treasury and the fiscal futures team in terms of the work that they are doing. The second one is that in Treasury, I think on page 97, Chair, on the infrastructure, I just want to understand, in the team of Provincial Treasury, do you have infrastructure finance skills? If so, which unit, who are those people, at what level, director, what level do you have? And I'm raising this because part of what I think we also have been observing is some of the limitations of delivery of housing infrastructure. I think in the province, because obviously there's a huge increase. I think from in-migration, that is something that we know and we've been talking about, which obviously, as more monies are being directed in consolidating the infrastructure portfolio and its budget, I think that becomes very important. And in line with that question, I would like also for you to relate to the question of Member Andrekas, of the extent to which such a capability is aligned to the municipalities, because we know that part of infrastructure programs must be implemented through the municipalities. And therefore, I'm asking not from just a delivery, from a budgeting point of view, that how is it that such skills and capacity, in your view, are present in the municipalities to ensure that you know, the kind of issues like conditional grants, including housing delivery and budgets, gets to be spent, because I think that's a big issue when it comes to informal settlement upgrading and including construction of houses with monies that have been already allocated by National Department of Human Settlements. Thank you very much. Those are my three for now.
Thank you very much. Members, any additional questions? I see none. I'll hand over to the department.
Thank you, Chair. Before I hand over to the team, let me just also indicate to the committee the way we deal with infrastructure. There's various units that deliver on this particular mandate coming from their area of expertise. So in particular on the municipal side, I'm going to rely on the supply chain team, because the bulk of the delivery when we talk supply chain, and we deal with municipalities, it is within that space and within that context. So I'm going to just ask Isaac to maybe just elaborate a little bit on the skills and the capacity at municipal level, and the projects that we've embarked on to support municipalities in that regard. And then Stephen, there is a couple there just in terms of the formula, the local government, just in terms of our responsibilities in terms of chapter 5 of the MFMA and the MOU in place with the Department of Local Government. But be that as it may, I think we'll deal with the questions, Chair. Maybe just in terms of the first question, and I'm going to ask the fiscal policy team also to step in here. In terms of there's two issues that the member raised, which is the dispute, but most of the questions were leaning towards the equitable share and our census data. So I'm going to start there and ask the team to just provide some additional information. So, Chair, when Stats SA made the results available, it was too late at the time for National Treasury to incorporate it in the formula, and then to respond in this financial year in relation to the census. And the member's quite correct. Some of the sub-data that is actually used in the formula at the time were not available, and therefore the review of the formula, especially the components that deals with education and health, which is the biggest part, carry the bulk of the formula, and actually determinants in terms of ultimately how much we're getting as a province, could not be reviewed. I think Minister keeps on indicating that we are now the third fastest growing, but we don't have the necessary, the funding is not necessarily flowing or responding to the growth. So that is the one issue, and our fiscal policy unit, Shirley Robinson and Mr. Malcolm Boyson, working with the Department of Education and Health, also with the Department of the Premier, because there is also a part of this that lies within that department, to ensure when they review the formula for implementation in the next MTF, so that we actually take the latest data into consideration, and therefore the formula should then respond better in terms of, we are hopeful because there's some issues that we are dealing with, because the formula does not necessarily speak to growth, and so that's a particular gap that we currently see, especially for Western Cape and Gauteng, that we are in the same boat in terms of the growth, and perhaps the formula is not as robust at this particular point in time to deal with those issues. So there is definitely also a role for the FFC in this particular instance to just in terms of the equitable share formula and the work that needs to be done within that space. A member raised the issue around the intergovernmental dispute that is ongoing. There is we are meeting with the mediator on the 19th. Is it 19th? Yes, 19th of this month, and then we should know where this is going. So that meeting has been set together with the DPSA, the National Treasury, and the province. So we at this particular point in time, we don't necessarily have an update, but it is ongoing. The formula review also, Shirley, will you just maybe touch on that? And then in terms of the question around integrated systems, so municipalities, unlike in the province where you have one system, we still have different systems within the municipal space. Just in terms of the relationship, especially as it relates to governance, there's a dual role it's with the Department of Local Government. In terms of the MOU, the Provincial Treasury takes responsibility for the financial aspects of that. Although in legislation, it is also with the Minister of Local Government. It's also with local government, but we do have an MOU in place. The reporting issue is an issue, and I think Stephen will be able to expand on it. It's an ongoing issue because we have the same reporting that we expect from your bigger municipalities is the same that we're expecting then from the smaller ones. But we do have a support that we provide municipalities. And I think in terms of our efforts in implementing or getting departments to have credible data through the MSCOA process is also work that is still continuing. And then a member in Nkondlo asked about the fiscal futures. I think Shirley will also deal with that. There's two aspects. The planning part of it is in relation to what the Department of the Premier is doing. The fiscal futures the project that we are responsible for is just in terms of us being able to forecast 10 over a period in future, really a 10-year horizon in terms of the different scenarios of what our fiscal future could potentially look like. So that is also work that we are currently embarking on, and we will soon be able to actually have a product that will assist us in just better forecasting our own revenue sources over a longer period of time, as opposed to just the 3 years, and then also feature as part of a fiscal futures work that the Department of the Premier is embarking on in terms of their planning horizon. So we'll be responsible for looking at the fiscal aspects. There's quite a number of units involved in infrastructure. But I think we can start with Isaac, and I think, Annelies, from your side, if there's anything that you would like to add, then please do so. And then Stephen, maybe just expand on the reporting and the MOU with DLG. So we'll start with Isaac, Annelies, infrastructure, then we'll go to Stephen, and then I think we'll end up with fiscal policy. Okay?
Okay, thank you, HOD. I want to respond to the question and just a little bit of a background on infrastructure delivery, because Member Nkondlo spoke about finance skills, but finance skills is not only in budgeting. So if you look at the infrastructure delivery system, there are 3 distinct components. The first one, of course, is budgeting and planning. The second one is supply chain management, that basically is on the delivery part. And the third one is asset management, which of course inform your budget and planning. And one should see it as a system in its totality. So that's the system of infrastructure delivery, both on a departmental and on a municipal space. Your question was particular to the municipal space. As far as infrastructure is concerned, and coming back to Member van der Westhuizen question about the dual role in different departments, it is actually a discipline where Provincial Treasury, Department of Local Government, and the Department of Environmental Affairs plays within. But as far as our province is concerned, and Sulinda spoke about the priority, effective local governance, the infrastructure part is actually driven under the auspices of the Department of Local Government and ourselves, and the Department of Environmental Affairs is part of that. The responsibility of the Department of Environmental Affairs is specifically on the spatial development framework, and then I've also on the capital expenditure framework. The Department of Local Government looks at the master plans, but also on some of the grants that's been allocated, like the MIG grant. And then, of course, from our side, we're particularly looking at the supply chain management and on the asset management side. So as far as those two areas are concerned, it's driven by the program 3 within the provincial treasury and the local government supply chain and asset management. So we've got two components, which of course there are still vacancies, but we've got sufficient staff with financial skills that can drive particularly the asset management, because that is one of the areas that there was not a lot of work done, and we've over the last year or so we've done asset assessments in all of the municipalities, which will be able to give you an indication in terms of where municipalities need to budget. So on the asset management side and on the supply chain side, we're comfortable that we do have the necessary finance skills to support municipalities. Of course, being part of the integrated group, we also attended the sessions with the Department of Local Government, with the engineers. What we also need to understand that the engineers within the municipal space plays a major role as far as budgeting and planning and delivery of infrastructure is concerned. Of course, there are other grants apart from the municipal own revenue. And I think Stephen, if Stephen responds to some of these issues, he can maybe just give an indication in how we're monitoring the capital expenditure from a municipal perspective. I think the question that Member Nkontlo asked was particular to housing. And also, of course, the transfer to the housing, which is also monitored on the provincial treasury side. I think as far as that is concerned, we'll probably get the other units to add more to that.
All right, so to add on in terms of what Mr. Smith has indicated, so from an infrastructure delivery perspective, I think in terms of broadly what we are saying is the fact that we require different skills set in terms of the delivery of infrastructure. So when we look at in terms of from the finance perspective, even within finance and delivery of infrastructure, they are in terms of the skill set in that is also quite diverse. So as Mr. Smith has indicated, on the supply chain management side, that is in terms of some of it, because that's quite crucial for implementation. A step for implementation is quite crucial, and therefore, from that perspective, we are looking at in terms of the supply chain management skill set. Then in terms of, and I think Member Mkondlo's question was in terms of from an infrastructure, we have an infrastructure within public finance. And so I'm going to speak to the part in terms of public finance. Now, with the skill set we currently have within the public finance team, it is broadly in terms of public finance from economic and accounting, so a public finance reporting understanding from that perspective. We have also in terms of quantity surveying skills that we also have, and then we also have part of our team that is part of the construction industry as well. So it forms in terms of quite an integrated perspective. Currently, we do have vacancies. The director infrastructure post is vacant, and we are but the post, the advert has been closed, and we're currently in the shortlisting phase of the recruitment. So one of the conversations we are having at the moment in the Treasury is the fact that what then are some of the gaps that we still have in our skill set, in terms of that we do feel that we have enough from a reporting perspective, understanding also in terms of being able to analyze and give advice from in terms of, like I said, more in terms of on the ground quantity surveying and checking from that perspective. Then in terms of looking from a development financing or financing on infrastructure is perhaps something, an area that we're currently looking at in terms of the skill set. We've also set funding aside in this budget to to set aside funding for a skill set in order for us to look at in terms of outside capacity, to assist in terms of both provincial and municipal, to assist in terms of getting a project pipeline in place. And that is looking at in terms of short-term, medium, and long-term for a project pipeline. So, but we're looking at in terms of being able to assist departments of where they require skill set in terms of getting that project what we're calling shovel ready. And so that is also then the skill set we are looking at, and the funding has been set aside in the budget in order to do so for capacity for both departments and municipalities. I don't know I think as Mr. Smith has also indicated the integration on the municipal side between the Department of Local Government and then ours. And I don't know if Stephen wants to add anything on the further infrastructure.
Thanks, Annelies. I'm going to start where you left off on the relationship between Department of Local Government and the Provincial Treasury, which I think Honourable van der Westhuizen made an observation about. And I guess the place to start is that it's the same. The roles for both are created in legislation, right? So it's the same across all 9 provinces, and even with our national counterparts. As the head of Treasury points out, in the Western Cape, we have a formal signed MOU dating back to 2009, which assigns the different duties, how those requirements in the MFMA and in the Systems and Structures Act are performed by each of the departments. Because the legislation refers to certain responsibilities being those of the MEC for local government, the MEC for finance, etc. But sometimes in the detail of the work, it's actually the Treasury that supports on a particular aspect, even if the MEC for local government may table the reports in the legislature, etc. So there is a formal relationship there, and we also have extensive working. I mean, we work very closely together. We're part of the same government. You know, we try to work as much as possible as one team, and we also obviously include other provincial departments in that work as well. So I think we have a fairly smooth working relationship. I think in the public interface, it can be maybe a little bit, you have to kind of get your head around the fact that there are these different departments. You asked a really excellent question, though, on the extent of the reporting burden. And as the HOD highlighted, it's an ongoing battle. So I was when you started asking the question, I was wondering if you were listening in on my meeting yesterday with the National Treasury counterparts, because it's very much a live issue right now. So a lot of the reporting in the system that we have is kind of 20 years old and is based on Excel reporting, etc., which was state of the art in 2004, but is now in the process of being updated onto new web-based systems, etc. So we're having a whole new generation of reporting. It's not new reporting requirements, it's a changeover in how the reporting is done. And as the head of Treasury says, the ongoing battle is to fight exactly this issue of how much can we use that transition to reduce reporting requirements. So in the meeting yesterday, we were having a bit of back and forth about the extent to which do they need to report in 2 places on the same thing, or could we not find a way to automate that if they submit the document in one place, it kind of automatically checks the tick box in another list so that they don't have to separately fill that in. So that's the kind of thing that we're going through constantly. I think the big point to land about the reporting requirements is that by and large, the reporting requirements are not prescribed by the Provincial Treasury, right? It's a national reporting system. And one of the big things we do is to try not to add additional reporting requirements. So to try and work within the national reports. Sometimes we ask for, rather than creating a new template from the Provincial Treasury and a new reporting requirement, we ask that in the reports they're already doing, can they just add XYZ information so that we're not unnecessarily adding to that burden. I would also observe it is a challenge in smaller municipalities, but it is also a challenge for larger municipalities in that in small municipalities, the CFO and the MM will be relatively hands-on and relatively kind of knowledgeable about the detail of what's happening in every aspect of their municipality. But the same sign-off requirements apply to the municipal manager and the CFO in a secondary city or a metro, where they might have delegated a lot of the day-to-day management of those things to lower levels in their organization. But the sign-off requirement, and including on these new electronic systems, the sign-off has to come all the way back to the municipal manager, who may not feel comfortable because it's, you know, that they don't work day to day in the way that they might in a smaller municipality. So it's throughout the system that we have these kind of issues. We very much agree with your stance that what we want to do in this space is to reduce the reporting burden. And I think we are in key places making progress, but it is, as the head of department says, an ongoing battle. Thank you.
Colleagues, so and members and chair, I will be responding to Member Africa's concerns and Member Nkundla, together with my colleague Malcolm Boyson on the PES and the census and fiscal futures. So as Ms. Quintana noted, the census results came in too late. While the broad numbers were there, Member Africa, and certainly they do reflect the in-migration and the growth. There are certain other components of the provincial equitable share that have poverty weightings, and in the education component, a disaggregation of children of school-going age, and that disaggregation was not yet available, and on the poverty component is still not available. So a principle of the Technical Committee in Finance and the engagements of the peers is that it cannot be updated in part. It has to be updated in full. So the decision was then taken to go through the Budget Council to go with the mid-year population estimates of the previous year. That does mean that we're looking forward to an upswing. We do understand, and my colleague Nadia Rehnquist has been leading on that, some of the municipalities are a little bit concerned around the census 22 results, and that's certainly in the Cape Winelands. I was at a meeting with Stats SA yesterday on the spatial tax data, and that kind of discussion came out as to how difficult it was to run a census in COVID periods. And while there are corrective factors in place, a number of the anomalies are still being discussed. So the peers, we are expecting to see the census move into an upswing as we move into the next round. So for the next budget, you will find that the census results will be incorporated in the baseline of the updated mid-year population estimate. So as we move forward, we will see that taking account. Ms. Quintana, our head of Treasury, noted the peers review. So the peers review is an ongoing process to make sure that the data and the components reflect on the ground requirements. The review ended up with on the health component, and we saw a change in the health component with the risk-adjusted health component that is now fully phased in to the 24-25 financial year. On the education side, the discussions are to look at a reform on the education component that starts to consider adding a further poverty weighting in the education component. Now, this is, remember that we deal with an equal vote in 9 provinces. So the growth provinces tend to be completely outweighted when each vote is counted. So as we move into the PES education formula review, it requires the poverty element of census in order to look at updating that particular table. It hasn't been updated since 2011. So that is a particular concern. The engagement is to look at including special needs and resource targeting, particularly on the poorer quintiles. So we are working with our colleagues at the Western Cape Education Department in this respect. And it is about a very tough engagement into the 2025 budget process. What we are seeing more broadly, and our minister has been quite vocal in this, is that, and our head of Treasury has noted, the PES is 20 years in operation, over 20 years. It was introduced in budget 1998. And over the 20 years, it has consistently moved in a very, very redistribution line. Now, inside the Treasury, we have different voices, but what we are aware of is that the PES is our major funding source, and it funds redistribution. It doesn't fund growth. So in the 1998 formula derivation, and we've engaged with colleagues who were part of that National Treasury engagement, is that conditional grants were used to fund growth. But now we're in this very variable budget process. We also had a formula that had options for provinces to look at taking up fiscal capacity. And those aspects have been tested through the years. There was a provincial fuel levy put on the table in 2008 and withdrawn in 2009. And so these kinds of aspects all come into play. There is no doubt that we have seen and are in the midst of a much stronger urbanization wave that is set to continue to 2050. So it is not, we're not stopping. You have to plan. And so it is about how the formula starts taking account of that. So expect this space to be quite turbulent. Expect it to, we are doing additional work in this respect. And the work is being led through my colleague, Mr. Malcolm Boysen, in the PES team, as well as being taken up in the fiscal futures. Malcolm, can I ask you to respond to any additional questions on the PES in terms of the formulation and also to take the fiscal futures, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Shirley. And I think the HOD has also covered in some of the issues. Just to mention that there was an undercount across the provinces. The Western Cape and Mpumalanga have experienced highest undercount. And I think in the case of the Western Cape, it's mainly related to gated communities and farms. So there will be auto correction going forward in terms of the media population figures that Shirley has mentioned. Just with regards to the fiscal futures and then the work that .P is doing, we are working closely together, and I'm serving also on the steering committee in that regard. Thank you.
And Chair, I think in terms of, as you can see at the technical level, we are quite, we're quite advanced in terms of thinking and going forward, looking at on the one side in terms of making sure from a perspective as the finance family that we are looking and making sure that the PES is in terms of responding to the current needs, because when we go back to, as has indicated, in 1998, I mean, the country had certain needs at that time. And so we are then being reflective in terms of saying, what does the next 20 to 30 years look like from a PES perspective and funding provinces going forward. But what I felt I wanted to just put some context. So the Department of the Premier, when it comes in terms of planning, they're looking at futures planning then for the province from a perspective in terms of what are those mega trends in terms of that is coming now, that we can see now, but it's also developing in terms of what is the next 20, 30 years going to look like. And therefore build in those capabilities within the province about futures planning. So then within futures planning, and I think that's why I want to do it, just in terms of that people understand the holistic picture. And then within futures planning, one of the elements is fiscal futures planning. And that's when the Treasury then is taking the lead on the fiscal futures planning part, which Malcolm has indicated that that's why he's also sitting on the Steercom department of the Premier, and then we are then leading then on fiscal futures from that perspective. Thank you, Chair. Then lastly, just in terms of the data and the census going forward, that's all work together with the Department of the Premier. The Provincial Data Office for the Department of the Premier is taking the lead regarding the census data, and then how do we influence that census data. There is a meeting that is being set up that is with Department of the Premier. The Provincial Treasury will be there, as well as DLG is also going to be meeting with Stats SA in terms of the next phases that they go in terms of reviewing the data that's coming out of the census, and then how do we influence that going forward. But that is that integrated team that's meeting with Stats SA. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. Are there any additional questions? I recognize Member Van Westhuizen, then Member Seleko, Member Nkondlo, and then Member Brinkhorst.
Thank you very much for that information that you've just given us. There are certain expenditure which we've got very little control, and I think you've explained also some of that. There are so many things that we can't control. One of them being quite often the cost of software. And it's the nature of the software business that many of these companies are big international players, and we've got very little scope to negotiate in terms of the cost. And I think you can immediately think of some of these software companies. But there's also the internal software, although it is based on international standards and programs, and the old names that we've become accustomed to are things like Persal and BAS and so on. Now, I do know that a number of years ago, we were informed that the Western Cape was chosen as a pilot site to test or try and implement the new, I think they call it like the integrated system for government. But we also know that very seldom software migrations run smoothly, because unfortunately many of these are only really tested once you implement it, and then it can create havoc, to put it frankly. So to what extent are we already using this integrated system? Are we being held responsible for the licensing costs of that integrated system? Is the fact that we are the guinea pigs perhaps, working in our favor in that we are able to use that? And are you, as Provincial Treasury, picking up the tab for the software licenses in the province, or how do we? I don't see that, and I think obviously in a high-level budget, I don't expect that it will probably be included under administration or something to that effect. Then, Chair, if I may also ask, in terms of the changes, and I'm referring here to page 88, almost in the middle of the page, just above the middle, where the budget decreased by 24 million from the 2023-2024 main estimate. Now, the moment a budget can be decreased by a significant percentage, I'm always questioning how was it possible to then adjust or bring about such major adjustment. But now it seems to me as if a lot of that downward adjustment has been taken up into or it's been put back in the budget that is currently in front of us. So perhaps if you could just tell us how was it possible? Did we over budget? Or how was it possible in a year where salaries and so on exceeded what we initially budgeted for? How come that it was possible at all to have such major adjustments? And then, Chair, we have met recently with officials responsible for the gambling board when we were considering applications, but we were not really discussing then the work formally the work on the gambling legislation. And some of the candidates informed us that there are certain voids that they've identified, for example, as with the movement of casinos and so on. Now, I'm really grateful to see on page 89, and it's about 2/3 down, where you say that research is currently being commissioned to rewrite our gambling legislation for the Western Cape. Perhaps if you could just inform us, about who's responsible for that research, what is being used as the basis for that research, and when can we expect then a draft green and white paper emanating from this research? Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Chair, mine is on page 87, and I'm glad that there was mentioned that in terms of the financial perspective. So one would want to know and ask maybe the department to talk about the call for citizen-centric service delivery in the Western Cape in the financial perspective. Just share what it means, for us in the financial perspective. That is the one. And secondly, Chair, it's on page 89. When the local government fiscal system, domestic resources, resource mobilization initiatives regarding new own revenue resources. Can the department just tell us, in terms of those particular initiatives, what are the successes? Is there any? Or what seems to be the challenges? Because with all this transition of renewable energy, there's potential that some of our municipalities might lose revenue when it comes to electricity. So I just want the department just to talk to us more about that. And also, Chair, on page 90, the socio-economic intelligence at a local level was developed by the Directorate to guide and improve planning policy and budgeting amongst 30 municipalities. Can you please share with us in terms of that particular initiative? What do you find to be challenging and what do you find to be working? Why I'm asking that, because it was brought to my attention that one of our municipalities in the province approved an unfunded adjustment budget. And I would like us to let us talk about these initiatives and what you as PT are trying to do within our province. But we seem to be moving backwards. You go 5 steps forward, and then there are councils that go 10 steps backwards. As a department that has an MOU, with local government, and unfortunately I will beg for indulgence because I will ask maybe questions mostly based on local government because I have, interest in there, and that's my disclaimer. And so I would really, really want us to go to the level to understand actually, what seems to be challenging that we are confronted with and what we are trying to do. Thank you very much. Those are the first 3 things.
Well, thank you, Chair. Maybe staying with the question and the follow up on the fiscal futures, and I'm quite okay with the responses shared on the work being done HOD. And one would have been put to this administration, at least to know exactly that from the fiscal work that you have done to determine what are those futures, Ms. Fick, what exactly have you came up with? Because the truth of the matter is that I think you are correct, Shirley. What would have been assumptions of 1994, 30 years down the line,
in whatever corner that you're sitting in, would have 30 years later been enriched by lived experiences. And surely a reflection and a type of thinking of how to utilize all of that data to then say, how do we then move forward, instead of trying to always be fighting about some of the aspects that are just a reality of how human development takes place. So for me, I think when you speak about including this issue of the formula, surely I don't think there's any doubt that the formula must be informed by trends. And such trends include the issue of in-migration, something that we would not have thought of in 1994. And that migration is not only the one of people outside of the country, just within, because the geography of our country and its reality, which is a historic fact, is something that we would not have thought we have not actually disrupted. And because we have not disrupted the geographies, we're finding ourselves that those kind of spaces in the past that would have been a better industrialized, like Gauteng, Western Cape, and a bit of KZN are attracting more people versus provinces that have been more rural. So that is a fact, and data will produce evidence to that effect. Now, for me, my interest is that at this point, 5 years later, when the Premier started with the notion of fiscal futures as something that will be looked at, and we also had the situation of the COVID-19 also even complicating our situation, I'm interested to know indeed, how are we dealing with these realities? Because there's nothing wrong with municipalities indeed finding themselves overburdened, from what would have been a more limited mandate, but the scope of local government is growing. Sometimes one even thinks whether to look at the 3 tiers of government or spheres of government, are we thinking about those and the cost implication of running these 3, national, province, and local government? Is it the most efficient governance and fiscal decentralization sort of mechanism? Because if we're not having these conversations, you are going to find yourself being bullied by ourselves as politicians sitting on this side and having more of a politicized conversation than more of a governance and practical, informed by data kind of a conversation. So for me, I'm really interested that 5 years down the line, if I were to be sitting here and I were to be asking as a voter, pardon me to say voter because we are in that phase. I'm a politician, so pardon me. I'm doing what I'm paid for. 5 years later, what type of sort of intervention from a fiscal point of view you would say, through the fiscal futures you've been able to conclude and produce for us? That's one thing, because obviously whoever was going to come in May, would actually be, it would be, is it May, June? Okay. Yeah, in June, would have to know exactly what are the trends and what is it that such a government must look at. So I'm interested in that. And secondly, the minister, when we're dealing with this budget, she says it's a pro-poor. So I'm asking, she's not here, and I understand why she's not here. But I'm asking, what is pro-poor about this budget? If you can tell me those indicators from a fiscal point of view, what is it in the budget that you have funded in Treasury, but in the bigger province that you could then claim to be pro-poor? So I'm interested to know what are those indicators that you have put for yourselves, because you are oversighting the budget spending of the different provincial departments, including the municipalities. So I want to be assured that at this point, when we are told that this is a pro-poor budget, must look for this and this and that, you know, in Treasury, but also in the other department to actually evidence the claim that this is a pro-poor. So I'm interested in that. My last one for this role, Chair, is that I think there are 3 expenditures that you are referring to here in the book. Why have I jumped my book now? Okay, just my apologies. I'm gonna get my page. It helps to speak from these pages. Page 90, I think it's page 91. Yeah, page 91. There you talk about 3 expenditure reviews. There's one on the benchmark on the COE. And we all know in page 90, not 91, page 90, my apologies, under public finance topic. In the benchmark analysis on COE versus other provinces, I'm gonna stick to Western Cape, where I'm a member of parliament. So I'm trying to understand, in your COE, what is it that you have found in your benchmark analysis, particularly in the Western Cape? And does your benchmark analysis gives any indication into the future that there would be any, if you are going to reconfigure, would there be any people that are going to lose jobs? It's a very clear question because partly any benchmark analysis, and I'm making a presumption, I may be incorrect, partly is to understand your compensation of employees, that is your structure, and whether some of the competencies do you need and all of that. So will this in any way indicate any possibility of people losing jobs? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. And good morning again to the department. And thank you very much for the hard work over the years coming to the end of this administration. As we look at the budget for the upcoming year 2024-2025, there's a lot of hard work by the department going into drawing up for us all this information. I want to concentrate on page 95 in regard to the budget office. Not many governments around the world, including the US, has a budget office. The US doesn't have a budget office. The South African government, fortunately, has a budget office. And I'm very happy to see that the Western Cape is following in that direction by having a budget office, in fact, having a provincial government budget office and a local government budget office. My question is simply a first round question regarding the budget office is, what is the budget for the budget office? And how many personnel do they have in the budget office, in the provincial government budget office? How many personnel do they have in that office? And how many personnel do they have in the local government budget office? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do the easy ones and the team will deal with the more difficult ones. Let me start with the systems one. Unfortunately, there is still no IFMS member. There will not be an IFMS in the near future. We have agreed, the Western Cape Cabinet has agreed to be a pilot site. So at this stage, we're not picking up any tabs But we are dealing with, and Isaac is leading the team. We are running a number of initiatives, especially when we start talking about our vision of service delivery and integrated service delivery for the citizen. There's a lot of things that our legacy systems are not necessarily giving us the evidence, or not unable, because it doesn't, there's no communication between these systems. So it makes it very difficult to have sufficient data or the evidence that will assist us in getting to our ultimate vision and our goal when we talk about citizen centricity and having the evidence to support that. So there's a number of initiatives that we have embarked on. And Isaac and the team will be able to expand on that. But also one of the other besides the evergreen, in terms of just dealing with our legacy systems, there's also a number of ICT initiatives that we are currently that's currently in progress to support and to get us to a point where we can say the evidence that we have is really speaking to what we want to achieve in terms of our target. And I think maybe the cost of software, I think you can maybe speak to that part as well. The issues around the gambling board, we happen to have scheduled a meeting later today with the researchers around the relocation. Malcolm and Shirley will be able to expand a bit on that. And we then also working with the Department of the Premier in terms of the legal services, in terms of the process of amendment. There's 2 amendments currently, the 20th and the 21st amendment, and that work is also still ongoing. I think the CFO will be able to deal with the detail in terms of the number of personnel, Nadia, and the budget. But Nadia Rinquist is here. She is the head of the local government budget office. So if she wants to just add, then also to that. And then I think, Malcolm, just in terms of the move, just expand a little bit on the process around the gambling board. Member Nkontlo, given, and Elise will come in here, it is not, the aim of the review is not, we're not saying people are going to lose their jobs. They are, to answer you straightforward, we're not saying, and nobody at this stage is losing their jobs, but we have embarked on a number of initiatives which Annalise is leading together with Michelle, and try and manage the growth. But there isn't a retrenchment tool. There isn't any at this stage. So that is how there's other initiatives underfoot to manage the compensation. And then just in terms of the pro-poor, we have, I see Annalise has got the page open there, but we have in this publication the overview of the provincial revenue. On page 72, we actually go into the detail, and any further detail, it's from page 72, 73, and 74. It actually provides the detail to support the claim in terms of the percentage spent that is pro-poor. And it details the initiatives per department, and also the non-financial information that would support the expenditure in that regard. So, I mean, with that, Isaac, over to you.
Thank you, Etsuti. Yeah, the IFM is a little bit of a sad story. As you're well aware, we've been asked these questions now for a couple of years in this house, and the IFMS is coming for more than a decade. Taking into account our history, what we decided whilst we're a pilot site under IFMS, in taking the performance levels of the National Treasury, we embarked on an approach of modernizing the legacy systems. You Mr. van der Westhuizen spoke about BAS, Logos, and Provincial. Those are our legacy systems, and then of course also recently our e-procurement system. So what we've done in that process is and the intention was to prepare ourselves for the IFMS, and we started to invest in the legacy systems, and I'll get to that. But just as far as the software is concerned, the IFMS, the software was covered by the National Treasury, and that is also why they also in Parliament, in terms of the millions and millions that was spent on software, and the system was not delivered. Of course, what have also put a hamper on the system is the SIU report last year, and it's quite clear that the National Treasury is thinking twice. On pushing the system as it was contracted for now, and might change that. And of course, that will have an impact on whether it's going to come within the new future, which we don't believe it will come. And hence, as a province, we need to prepare ourselves. In discussions with the National Treasury, they've also indicated they will give more. They will open up, the development of systems by provinces, and just recently they gave us approval for the development of e-leave in a HR model. So that is in line with our strategy to look at the legacy systems. So our intention is, Member van der Westhuizen, to build on what we've got. There are gaps. And I'm going to ask my colleague Kulani just talk about the data projects, because it's integral part to our strategy. So what we've embarked upon with our CI colleagues is to look at all the financial related systems under the application portfolio management, because what has happened in the absence of the IFMS is that departments have developed pockets of systems, and we're just trying to arrest that situation. So the strategy is to actually leverage from what the departments have developed and see to what extent that can then make a transversal application. For instance, the My Portal e-leave HR system, where it started off in the Department of Health, and together with the Department of the Premier, we identified it as a system that can have transversal applicability. So as far as the cost is concerned, we also then leverage from what has been allocated to departments already for development of systems, and particularly on financial systems, bring that together between ourselves as a Provincial Treasury and our CEI colleagues in .P. So that is a strategy, and technically, if one can, we're building IFS, an integrated financial system based on our legacy systems, because the IFMS is not coming. If we don't do that, departments are keeping on developing and spending money on systems which is not integrated at the end. And Kolani is running our data warehouse project, which will be the layer that will pull that integration together. And I'm going to ask him to give a viewpoint. Just in terms of the cost on the legacy systems, Provincial, Logos, and BAS, of course, as a Provincial Treasury, we cover our own expenditure and then certain transversal functions, but mostly each and every department cover their costs attached to the use of the system. As far as other software is concerned, of course, that is, to a large extent, it's centralized by the Department of the Premier. And of course, they monitor that as far as the expenditure is concerned. Maybe there should be a question posed to them as far as the software is concerned. But then also we have got a Provincial ICT Forum where all the departments are represented, and then come with any proposed project that they want to embark upon, and then there's an architecture board that will give approval just from monitoring the development of systems and also expenditure on software. I just want to give Kolani to give a little bit of feedback on the data project that we're driving.
Thank you, colleagues, and good morning to the members. I'm just going to be brief from our side. I think the focus, as we all know, as Mrs. Smith has indicated, we run into delays due to the IFMS. However, as Western Cape government, we know that we've been using extensively and also the licenses within Microsoft. What does Microsoft have is the integration part. So most of our application that we utilize, they have the integration to interact to one another. So we're trying to learn from there using those skills from Microsoft, especially around data, building a centralized repository where when we get the data from these legacy systems, we'll try to pre-build a layer for where when we interact with the data and also able to provide data sets to the departments, we find one central repository for the departments to interact with the data. So what we have done from our side is to build a cloud-based environment, what will then allow us to able to integrate, able to access one version of the data, which will be able to save a lot of costs. As we also know, in terms of pulling reports from the legacy system does have its own cost implications, and also as well the performance from the legacy systems. So that is the current project that we are working on, and ensuring that we are building these small solutions within units to be getting ready for the FMS when it does come at that point, which we still waiting for it, but we are getting ready from our side. Thank you.
Thanks, Kulani. Annelies, perhaps on the ProPoor and the expand a little bit on the work with the Department of the Premier in terms of the cost, the wage, the COE. Okay, whilst just applying your mind, let's go. Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So on the ProPoor, I think the members are aware in terms of what we're calling this year, by the way, it's the white book. Usually we have a blue book, but a white book in terms of the overview of the provincial budget. And in there, we've indicated some of the breakdown of the ProPoor information that we've indicated. So as the ministers indicated, of the 255 billion rand we're spending in terms of these plans for the next 3 years, 191 billion of that, so 75% of that is in terms of what we have categorized as ProPoor. Of that 191 million, about 41% of that is within the Department of Health. So I think coming down to the nuts and bolts of the questions, and well, within health, how did you then identify in terms of programs? And so what we then did in terms of together with all the departments. So when we looked at in the Department of Health, we looked at in terms of our primary healthcare services. We looked at home and community-based care services. Then in terms of there's a part in terms of also within the budget, so you can be able to look at within those programs then. Then within the program of that is encapsulated in the overview, we call it transitional care hospitals. But the transitional care hospitals then includes in terms of, for example, in terms of our specialized psychiatric hospitals. It includes in terms of our TB hospitals in terms of the running and costing of that. And then also then in terms of acute care hospitals from that perspective. So those are the programs that we looked at, and therefore it's also then those targets in the APP that makes up then in terms of that 41%, as I indicated. When we're looking at the Department of Education, now they make up 34% of that 191 billion rand, apologies. And so there we looked at in terms of learner transport, it's because who we're targeting then also in terms of the services that we are providing. So it is in terms of learner transport. Within public schools, we looked at in terms of the various quintiles, and we identified those quintiles. We looked also within our infrastructure portfolio within education in terms of where that portfolio and the planning is of schools in terms of from that perspective. So we included that. Then also most important then is the National School Nutrition Program. So that program, not only the funding from national, but then also the funding that we're also providing from the provincial fiscus on school nutrition program. So we looked at those programs within education and health, and then the overview then gives you further on all the other programs within the different departments, but that makes up the bulk then in terms of the kind of programs and sub-programs we looked at within the pro-poor. Yes, I just also want to just indicate, and perhaps in terms of give some guidance on, and I think maybe that's where the HOT is giving me guidance on the work with the Department of the Premier. Apologies, HOT, that I had a blank space there just for a few seconds. But I think we need to indicate in terms of why the Treasury has done a benchmarking with a few other provinces regarding our COE. So, and this was just in terms of during COVID, and that we actually asked for GTAC. So in terms of an external provider and partner then to assist us into looking at in terms of just the composition of COE, and this then was in the COVID, when we were in COVID, we asked them to assist us. Number one, to assist us with building capacity, that kind of analytical capacity within the provincial treasury, but then also in terms of looking at in terms of just in terms of our composition of COE at the time. So, and we asked them to do some kind of comparison, very high level at that time, comparing ourselves then also to other provinces. And then the National Treasury took over the project, and they then asked GTAC to do the similar exercise for all the other provinces. Now, one of the things that came out of there was the fact that when the Western Cape at a high level was compared to the other provinces, we then had, for every department, we had then the lowest COE composition. You would think that that is obvious if at 54% of our budget, we are percentage-wise the lowest in the country, even when you compare us to the national government. And so we shouldn't have been surprised that we are then, in terms of when we are the lowest when we compare department on department, or let's say service delivery area, when you're comparing us across all the other provinces. So we then wanted to take that further and saying, well, if that's the high level, but surely firstly, there's perhaps opportunities we can learn from other provinces. In terms of there could have been some COE decisions that they've made that perhaps in terms of can assist us going forward. Secondly, we're wanting to also look at in terms of then where are our pockets in terms of service delivery that we are perhaps not meeting a standard norm that we should be meeting, and then what is that standard norm, and that's why we're being compared. Then in terms of, so from that perspective, that is why we were doing the expenditure review and comparing ourselves then in detail to we chose three other provinces, because this is the position we're in. When we were indicated that we were not going to get funding in the current financial year for the wage agreement, we needed to go and find funding in terms of how departments are going to fund that. One of the things they looked at is within their COE budget. And National, however, was saying to us in the fiscal consolidation, we actually need to look in terms of that retirement age of staff, and in terms of we need to let them go and retire, and over time we will put savings together. The context of our provinces, we can't afford even departments really to go on retirement, because I mean, we're already just so lean in terms of our COE. So I want to give assurances to Member Nkondlo, it is not looking for retrenchment. It is actually looking for kind of pockets of efficiencies, and in terms of for us then also to influence the bigger picture then within the health sector. For example, the bigger picture within the education sector, in terms of for us those kind of major services we're delivering, of where the entire system of health, for example, and education can find efficiencies within. So it's with that in mind, but definitely not in terms of retrenchment. We can't afford to leave staff in the Western Cape because we are lean. And so then it is, if we find ourselves in this position, it's now in terms of some of the work going forward with the Department of the Premier then, in terms of looking at, in terms of us responding from, in terms, not only from an efficiency perspective where staff is concerned, but the effectiveness of staff, and also in terms of the mental well-being of staff. If we do know that we are the leanest regional government or provincial government for South Africa, there is then also a burden on our staff, and we need to be able to understand what that is there for, and therefore to respond accordingly as a provincial government. And that is what we're working together with the Department of the Premier.
Thank you, Annelies. Maybe to also, in a way, through you, Chair, we're also responding to the question around citizen centricity and how this budget respond to that, because the initiatives that we are actually talking to are all aiming at then the focus is in terms of service delivery. The one aspect that we not necessarily spoke about, but in terms of our principles, which is allocative efficiency, one of the areas that we are focusing on in the supply chain, both from local government as well as provincial government, are the issues around value for money. And value for money not only in terms of government, but also how does that translate into benefit for the citizen? Because the minute we become much more savvy with our procurement system, we actually then also free up opportunities and funding for other services in a way that is also directly linked to service delivery. And then the responses in terms of the pro-poor, that is in terms of responding to the principle, that is also a way in which we had to look at our budget. The expenditure reviews would also speak to that particular aspect, member, of the work that we do in that, as well as the response in terms of the data and the evidence that Kolani and Isaac spoke to. Those are all areas that we're trying to ensure that the decisions we make around this budget respond to citizen needs. I'm going to ask Stephen, just in terms of the unfunded issue and how we respond and the support that we provide municipalities. I think for this team, although it's a small team, it's a small treasury. Annelies has just spoken to the COE. We can't afford to become tired. Some of these things, we find that we have to do it over and over and over again, and we do it because we're here to serve. So Stephen will definitely speak to some of the work that we're doing within a municipal space. The evidence, I think, Nadia, just to reiterate, we came to the House with the Mero earlier in the last year. We already in 2024 last year, and maybe just the lessons learned, and then the CFO will also then just speak to the budget and the numbers in terms of the personnel. Stephen?
Thanks, HOD. I'm glad that you linked the question to the unfunded budgets, because the question started from new own revenue sources, I think. And I just want to, we are exploring new own revenue sources. We also think that there are spaces in which existing own revenue sources aren't maximized. And I think development charges are perhaps one of the key ones around infrastructure financing, in particular in local government. But I just, particularly with reference to struggling municipalities, I just want to dispel the notion that there is some magic source of funding that is on the table that's not being accessed. And when we engage with vulnerable municipalities, I think that's one of the points that we try to drive home to them, that there's not going to be a big bailout from national provincial government. That's not a credible solution to their problems. And also there isn't, there are often problems in their own revenue collection, for example, the maximization of existing revenue sources, but there isn't in any of our municipalities some major revenue source that's not being looked at. And a lot of, when you look at the revenue enhancement projects that are done by external consultants, it's a DBSA, etc., it always comes back to the same things, is going through carefully line by line in all your general valuation reconciliations, in fixing anomalies, making sure that all the bills are issued, etc. That's where the revenue gap, the revenue shortfall is in most of those municipalities. So we have at the moment 5 municipalities that were assessed to have unfunded budgets at the start of the year. We've supported all 5 of those to adopt budget funding plans, with the exception of Beaufort West, where there's already a mandatory financial recovery plan that kind of supersedes what any budget funding plan would need to say. So, and we monitor the implementation of those. The question referenced the adjustments budgets, and I will just say for the record that the Provincial Treasury has not yet formally issued an assessment on the funding status of the adjustments budgets. The adjustments budgets were only adopted at the end of February. So we did identify municipalities that were at risk of slipping into an unfunded status, and we have proactively engaged with municipalities on that basis, but we have not formally given an assessment on the funding statements of the adjustments budget, whether anyone has graduated to funded or slipped to unfunded, but we are proactively engaging with municipalities around the risks, particularly where in our in-year monitoring we've picked up that revenue collection has fallen behind target, and expenditure hasn't been managed down, to match that. So we are kind of, yeah, and we've had some tough conversations with some of the municipalities around exactly those issues to try and make sure that that they don't get into deeper trouble than is necessary, and that they take appropriate action, because the adjustments budget was a key opportunity for them to make the necessary changes, which is why we've engaged some of them on a sort of warning caution basis. And we're now engaging in the preparation of the next financial year's budgets to make sure that if there are cases where municipalities are in an unfunded position now, that they're taking the necessary measures in their main budgets for next financial year, and that'll be a major focus of our work over the next few months, to make sure that the revenue that is on the table is collected, that they're not missing any of that, and that growth in expenditure is constrained to fit within resources. Because the other point, just to close with, about additional revenue sources, is that we're very cognizant that the only place additional revenue can come from is our own citizens. So, tariff increases, etc., property rates are all sources. Even national grants ultimately come from the national tax base, right? So all of these come back to extracting funds from local communities who are already economically stressed themselves, which is why we place in our assessments on municipalities such an emphasis on driving efficiency in expenditure, so that their cost structures are as lean as possible, so that we can minimize the need for increases on residents. Thank you. I think Nadia might want to comment on the socioeconomic.
Before Nadia, can Malcolm gambling?
Thank you. Just with regards to gambling, the consultants that were pointed, FTI Consulting, and they specialist competition economist and regulatory economist. The research have focused on the economic analysis of the casino licensing in the Western Cape, looking at the possibility of a free movement of casinos within the Western Cape. So we're looking at all different modalities, and then also looking at different forms of gambling, in particular LPMs, the rollout of bigger LPMs, and then also looking into sports betting, which is a growing sector or subsector of the gambling industry. In terms of the timelines for the 21st and 20th amendment bills, the 21st amendment bill is likely to be prioritized and going out for comment towards mid-May. And as with regards to the question on the green paper, likely to have a draft green paper by September, and then a draft white paper in June next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member, for the question on the socioeconomic intelligence. As our HET mentioned, we did table the MERO in November 2023. If you're aware of the MERO is 6 books at a district level, And the relevance of the MERO is that it's used in municipal planning. And so the timing of tabling it is important. But further on from the MERO, our unit produces 30 socioeconomic reports called the CEPALGs, and those are taken down to a municipal level. So in those reports, we then take the data that's available at the local municipal level, and we develop these reports for municipalities, which include information on their population, their households, their poverty, their access to services, their crime, the health, education, the infrastructure, their climate change and disasters situation. And the relevance of that is that the municipalities use these 30 profiles in their planning and in the IDP. So if you go to any of the municipalities' IDPs, you will find those socioeconomic profiles used there, because municipalities don't always have the capacity to do their own research at that level. So we provide that service for all the municipalities to be able to influence their planning. And then that data and the trends pull through into what we call the A10. It's a schedule of their municipal budgets, where they need to take into account what are the levels of poverty, how many indigent households, what do they need to be providing in terms of, let's say, free basic services, and account for all that in the budget. So the data-led planning is very important. The evidence is important, and we feel it's a critical resource for municipalities to be able to provide, good planning and good budgeting within their jurisdictions. So those are the socioeconomic initiatives, the MERO as well as the CEPALGs. The MERO is used not only by municipalities, it's used by business chambers, it's used by investors, by citizens, by other departments in the Western Cape, such as education, to understand the local economy and to understand the dynamics of each district. So if you want to move to a district, buy a house in a district, the MERO will give you all those sorts of information that will influence your decisions. So it's used at very several stakeholders, and the CEPALGs, I can assure you, it is used by every municipality, with possibly the exception of the city of Cape Town, because they have a lot of their own capacity and economists themselves, and so they sometimes have different data sources or opinions that they want to present within their documents. But the rest of the municipality, most definitely, you'll find the data there. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, good morning again. Just on the budget for the budget offices, as the member have indicated, there are two, the Provincial Budget Office, and the budget for the Provincial Budget Office is 9.9 million, and for the Local Government Budget Office is 10 million. And I think all the PEROs and the MEROs, the budget for those documents is included in that. So in total, it's 21 million or 20.610 million. The staff establishments for those offices, both of them is, for the PG Budget Office is 12, totally staff establishment, and the Local Government Budget Office is 10. Currently, there's 8 filled vacancies, filled posts in all of in both of the units. So there's quite a huge 25% and 20% unfunded vacancies within those units. I think I can also just respond to Member van der Westhuizen's question on the adjustments estimates and the reduction on the 23 million. I think, as Jolinda has indicated previously, when the Treasury issues in budget circulars, the Provincial Treasury also need to follow the instructions or the budget circulars. So it was obviously we knew about the fiscal position and the possibility or there's no additional funding. So what we needed to do also already in the 23 or in the current financial year, the 23-24 financial year, we needed to really re-look at our COE, re-look at our goods and services, as well as our transfer payments to come within certain scenarios that the Provincial Treasury has given to us. So we looked at our COE and also our number of interns, and at that stage we needed to really look at our critical vacancies and determine which ones we are going to fill and not fill. And then also re-looking at the the work back period of our interns, as well as the number of interns. So for COE, you will remember in the adjustment estimate, we reduced our COE with 8.7 million. We also looked at, for example, the transfers to the gambling board and the additional revenue that they collected, so we could reduce this allocation by 3.5 million. Also in the adjustment estimate, we transferred 5 million to the Department of Infrastructure for the modernization light project. We looked at our training, how can we do it differently? We looked at, for example, our number of motor vehicles, so we reduced that. We looked at our computer equipment, so we looked at everything to ensure that we will be able to meet the COE obligation in the new financial year. So I think the message that I want to bring, we really looked at all of our goods and services as well as our COE, and how could we better do things more efficiently and have those savings so that we can fund the COE. Because you will also see, if you look on page 104, that our goods and our compensation increased by 10%, but you will see between the adjustments estimate and then the main estimate, but our goods and services decreased by 1.2%. So I think as Jolinda also indicated in the beginning, because we are driven by COE or by people, I think that's remained our main focus area is compensation and keeping the people and trying to reduce the vacancy rate in the different units. Yeah, so that is just the reason why the 23 million was reduced. We could reduce the 23 million in the adjustments estimate just to plan for being able to fund the COE in the next financial year. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we are on to our final round of questions. I see Member Seleko, Member Nkontlo, Member van der Westhuizen, in that order.
No, thank you very much, Chair. And Chair, it will be my last questions. And I will start with the first one, Chair, that about the notice that the department sent on the 21st of December last year pertaining to Kanaland. It was a question that I was confronted as the Chair of local government. Why weren't we not informed and wara about the FRP 139 subsection 5A in Kanaland, and the notice was sent in December last year. And I just want the department to explain the process in terms of that particular 139 5A. Who gets informed? Does this committee play a role in terms of that particular intervention, or does it go to local government? Because that was a question that was asked, but we are clear in terms of 139, subsection 1A and B, that it goes to COGTAD and it goes to the NCOP. But I think there was a question in terms of this particular one for Kanaland. And one would appreciate the effort that the department has played pertaining to the 4 municipalities that were in arrears with ESCOM. They were very successful in terms of the debt relief program. But then the question begs, someone gets rehabilitated and then you fall back again. So I just want to know from the department, what measures are in place to make sure that, the efforts that you have made to be at that stage, for them to be at that level, that they don't regress and find themselves in the same position that they were before. And one other issue is MPEX, but I'm not going to dwell into the issue of MPEX. So it's a debate for another day. But there's just this word that I don't like in local government, municipalities in distress. How does a municipality become distressed? You find the municipality, the bank balance is great, they are okay. But within a year or two, then they become in distress. And I just want to know from the department, maybe Stephen can answer this one. What are we going to do as a responsible government when we send our in-year monitoring reports to municipalities and say, look at this, look at that, and they just, they just ignore it. They just ignore it, and then they say, we don't account to you. And then we find out, and then they would come to us as government when they're in distress. But we warn them and say, look out for this, look out for that. They were just ignorant. What are we going to do with such? What is it for? What is there to do for us? One painful issue that I've experienced within the local government sphere is the abuse of Regulation 36. The abuse of Regulation 36 of the MFMA. What are we going to do about such issues? Because I can assure you, one of the contributors for you as PT to intervene is because of the abuse of that particular Regulation 36 of the MFMA. When people deviate for no reason. A typical example, a municipality goes out for a deviation for 2.9 million for cleaning. How does one justify the use of that particular regulation for cleaning a town, which is your competence as a municipality, and you deviate? And then if you go to that municipality now, I can assure you, there are issues there. And these things keep on happening and happening, and and nothing happens. And I'm asking you as PT, if you have not thought about it, say maybe next term, because we won't be here, but you will be here. Look at this particular Regulation 36. Because it's been abused and there is no consequent management. And we are here. And the masses outside there are suffering because of people who does not care about the coffers of our municipalities. Our roads got potholes. There are issues of water. People don't get water because of the decision that we are taking. Thank you very much.
Almost got emotionally paralyzed with the submission, with the submission of the chairperson of the local government. I got emotionally paralyzed. Anyway, anyway, Chair, I must say, on my last round, I think, Chair, one of the things in the discussions, and one does not want to belabor the point, about how are we planning our futures. Because I can imagine local government officials that are not in the room, to represent themselves, so that we start understanding the nuances of municipalities, and they not find themselves as naughty kids who are sent into a naughty corner by province and national. And I think for me, this speaks to governance and fiscal decentralization, whether it is working or not. Because the reality, we're not going to get to this conversation, Chair and Chairperson of local government. It's not sustainable. That we sitting at the provincial level, looking down at municipalities, we see them as the naughty kids. I think national will do the same and see provinces and local government as naughty kids. Perhaps it is indeed in that conversation of those people that are very clever than me, who are looking at analysis, because we need answers, colleagues. And those answers indeed have got to do with how do we reconfigure the state in a manner 30 years later that learns things better and we avoid this kind of conversation. But also, I think the colleague was speaking about the Mero and the work that is being done there, which is which is great work. But also for me, I still have a challenge where we get to a point where municipalities always do not have capacity. Capacity is sitting at province, capacity is sitting at national. But the people that are closer to service delivery is the municipality. And it seems we are very happy at a provincial level, at a national level, you know, to speak about these naughty kids at a local government level. And I think for me, something must give in really rethinking about governance of the state, including how we finance. Because we are going to keep on, because I would love that capability of the mayor, which I must admit, I'm one groupie of the mayor since I came here. From the previous mayor, I'm a groupie of mayor because, yes, it has helped me a lot to be a better member of the legislature. And I must give it to you, colleagues, on that one. I mean, that's great work that you guys do. But I think it's important to get to a level that municipalities must be able, because this is information, they must be able to have that capability to research. Are we not financing municipalities better so that they've got the relevant or necessary research capacity? Because one of the things, HOD, you see with these programs on page 72 and 73 that between yourself and Ms. Fick, you have directed me to on the pro-poor budget, I am going to use the mayor to actually get the evidence that indeed the money that you are putting and you are calling pro-poor, that mayor is going to tell us, the next one that we are going to do, that indeed this spend that was said, it's actually pro-poor, it must show in the Gini coefficient of these municipalities. Because remember, as you talk about money for learner transport, money for, you know, transitional care, you know, I get these new terms, we must see it there. Does it make impact at the end of the day? Because the people that are poor reside in a particular community, in a ward, in a municipality. So this is why I think this conversation, Chair, is very important. And I just wanted to make that particular a comment for myself. It is not even a question at this point, is that indeed the capacity issues are very important at a municipal level. And we need to drive the conversation of getting to a point where municipalities do have capacity. They are not kids that must be sent to the naughty corner, you know, around issues of underspending or the thing that the chairperson is raising. And then I think I would want to advise, if Treasury has not read, actually the Fiscal Commission, I think they are 2024-25 annual submission. I think they are raising very important issues, particularly around this issue of learner transport, because also whilst it's a good intention, in the absence of a policy around learner transport, and there is a big gap currently about learner transport in terms of a policy that clarifies the issue of learner transport, both in the urban settings, because remember in the urban settings also you've got the issue of private transport, you know, that is there, that currently also there's no regulation. As a person who also sits in that committee, we're sitting with an association of those that are providing learner transport, and they're looking for government to intervene, because other than the challenges of safety, you know, in that space, also there's a challenge of there's no permitting there, there's bullying sometimes that is happening by the taxi industry with them. So whilst it's a good intention, if you put in money and there is lack of policy clarity, the desired impact of this being pro-poor just get lost in the system, and then you come back and we don't see the results through the mayor. So I think this is a very important read in terms of, because they even mentioned there that actually national and provincial treasuries, in consultation with provincial departments of transport and basic education, should develop a new funding model for learner transport. They further say such a model must also include flexibility for provinces to address emergency contract to provide learner transport. So I'm just saying it's important to consider these issues as and I'm just using this one issue because not the only issue you are raising here in page 72, 73. The last one, just tell me in page 123, program 1, administration, and you have told us in your book that part of what you have been looking at is this program, administration and the budgets thereof. I see there in consultants and professional services that actually there's a 93.8 increase of their budget. Why? What exactly are we buying there? Why should we be spending? Why should we be having such a sharp increase of consultancy? If you can explain that to me, including the operating leases. What exactly are those? So I think that's just my last question, Chair, on this. On this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, back to my questions regarding ICT, software, etc. We've all read that SITA, the State Information Technology Agency, has found that a tender which, if I read the lines correctly, they administered was then eventually found to be irregular, and that they are currently in court to have that agreement set aside, and that the Western Cape is not a party to that case. We are just happen to be the place where the rollout would have been implemented in our Western Cape schools. Perhaps if you would just share with us your experience with SITA, because in the past we've had numerous complaints. There's been a lot of instability with a high turnover of CEOs, etc. And is there something which Provincial Treasury can do to perhaps ensure that in future Western Cape schools don't suffer because of bungling by national entities? The second one is, and I'm referring to your study that you are doing on what you call public entities. It seems to me like a benchmarking exercise, or you're looking at the efficiency of our public entities, and it's something which I really welcome. Well, I personally have been concerned about the high number of committees and entities and boards, etc., that are being set up. We know that our president has been accused that the moment he runs into a problem, he first sets up a commission to study that subject or advise him in that regard, etc. And all these things cost money, and they often delay processes. So will your overview study of public entities perhaps also in future include just a form of benchmarking for tribunals and many of these boards and so on that we also have in the Western Cape, to ensure that they are cost effective, that we are getting value for money from these entities, and if not, to come up with recommendations on how we can perhaps improve the output, or at least get a higher bang for our buck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But also, for the record, we are in the middle of a public meeting. Just offer the opportunity to any members of the public who may be in the house or online to indicate if they have a question. Okay, I see no hands. I would also just like to pose a question. I think the colleagues have been very, very thorough, so there's not much left for me. But just in terms of the announcement made by the Minister on looking into blended finance, if we could get an update on that, and to what extent can that help us to alleviate the implications of the budget cuts? Okay, with that, we'll hand over to the department.
Thank you, Chair. The last round, I think, it's really hitting home. So we'll start with Member Soloka, and I'm going to ask Stephen. I think, Stephen, just touch on our early warning system as well, the criteria that we use to monitor so that we can proactively begin to assist municipalities that we see regressing. But in terms of in terms of the debt relief, where we are, the progress made, and perhaps also the issues that we've picked up in that, and then obviously the process. Isaac will deal with Regulation 36 in the detail, and I think Member Nkondla, your comments really are noted, and I think the issues that you are raising are issues that I think from where we're sitting, we're grappling with. We don't necessarily have the answers, because the answer cannot lie just within the province or the provincial treasury. But these are the issues that I think that is uppermost in our minds, and that we recognize one would need to unpack. To ensure that we actually get a better outcome. The reference to the FFC report, I think the colleagues on the fiscal policy side has been dealing with. Just in terms of the program 1, the CFO will deal with the operating leases, and I will deal with the spike in terms of the consultancy services there. So we don't have at this stage carry through funding for personnel, because we needed to reduce. So the funding here in program 1 is to look at specifically explore ways in which we can respond to fiscal consolidation, looking for alternative sources of revenue. So it is in terms of getting capacity in the short term to support us in our research in terms of trying to tap into potential existing sources that we have not tapped into sufficiently. One of those would be really looking at donor funding, how we engage with donors, how do we bring them in and respond to some of the service delivery needs that we experience both at provincial and municipal level. And the work that we're doing in terms of the World Bank and the blended finance is one aspect, and Shirley will be able to expand on that particular aspect of the work there. So this is really funding that don't have that carry through, so we can't buy or employ people, but we do have a need that we think we can respond to in the short term in terms of the sourcing in some of the capacity that we need in that regard. And then the operating leases, the CFO will deal with Isaac first, and then we'll go around until the last one would be the CFO on the operating lease.
Okay, yeah, just on Regulation 36, I think we also have a similar kind of provision on the provincial government side. So the definition of Regulation 36 is a very narrow application, which means that municipalities will always be in problem in the way that is defined. What we've done in a provincial space, of course, there's a different responsibility from the provincial treasury vis-a-vis the local government, is actually to define the whole issue of deviations. And if you look at the research and, across the world, if you look at procurement methods, you get procurement methods of negotiated bidding, you get a limited or closed bidding, which is normal accepted bidding processes within the international space. Now, unfortunately, our current environment doesn't make provision for that. And although that's accepted procurement methods, it's in our context, it's seen as deviations. And if you talk about negotiated bidding and even limited bidding, there is a process of approaching the market to see what is available. So that is a normal acceptable practice internationally, which we're also applying on the provincial side. So you'll see that on the provincial side, there's not a lot of those issues coming to the fore because the definition of deviations, is been brought and covered under some of our processes and methodologies that we've put in place. The municipalities, unfortunately, don't have that, and we hopefully now with the new legislation coming through, that will be broadened. That is just under definition itself. Now, deviations becomes a problem if you don't do proper planning. That is ultimately the reason for deviations. So as the provincial treasury, we have embarked over these years in actually instilling procurement planning within municipalities. So we've got work groups, that brings out research in terms of how we need to instill best procurement planning within municipalities. And as a provincial treasury, we also assess not all municipalities. In one particular year, we're trying to at least cover municipalities over a number of years. What we found is the communication between the planning and the supply chain management unit. We also found that the supply chain management, which is assists with procurement planning, is not necessarily part of the IDP process, and that is where you need to rectify. Recently, we have put procurement, and particularly strategic procurement, on the agenda, not only on the supply chain forum or the CFO forum, but also on the municipal, the MM's forum as well. So it is an issue that we've put high on the agenda, and particular from a procurement planning perspective. There've been quite a lot of good practices developed in some of the municipalities, which we use to also guide other municipalities, where the MMs have actually put the issue of procurement planning into the performance agreements of their directors. And in those particular provinces, you've seen municipalities, you've seen that there's either no deviations or it came down drastically. Deviations is normally happens, and it's linked to emergencies where it's something that you cannot foresee. So the example that you've used, I mean, that's one of those commodities that should never be in a deviation or in an emergency. You should be able, because you must do trend analysis. So we're doing quite a bit as far as that is concerned. But of course, it is the system within municipalities that needs to drive that. And as I've said, the best practice where we've seen, we do communicate it to other municipalities. And Juliana, I'm not sure the issue of the public entity review. If Adila, if you can just respond to that.
Good morning. With regards to the public entity review, I think just to highlight that the importance of this review was to highlight the oversight functions and accountability and transparency for the public entities, the departments, as well as the provincial treasury. In terms of the comment regarding benchmarking and the creation of too many committees at a national level, that is not the intent of this public entity review or guideline. It is more to enhance the current structures. We're not trying to create a fatigue in terms of more committees, more tribunals, in terms of any more being established. It's to enhance, like I indicated, accountability, transparency, and basically efficiency in terms of our financial governance reporting.
Stephen?
Thank you, HOD. If you indulge me, I'll start from Honourable Nkontlo's question about the way we respond to local government, because I think it's instructive. I mean, we see local government, the Constitution sets out that they're a sphere of government, just like the province is, and we always try to engage them in a respectful manner, respectful of that, and that they have, they're responsible and accountable for what happens in their own sphere. And in all of our interactions, I mean, you'll notice that the Provincial Treasury does not have powers to instruct a municipality. So we're always providing advice, we're providing oversight, we're providing information. I think a lot of what we do as the Treasury team is we try to, you know, and I think the Mero is a great example of that, is we try to provide things where it wouldn't make sense for each of the 30 municipalities to kind of do their own version of something. We can kind of act as a collective to kind of supply something centrally like that analysis. But I do want to emphasize that our municipalities have very strong capacity, and in many cases, I mean, the role of the Treasury is to facilitate the sharing of information from one municipality to another. I mean, I think in the Western Cape especially, we have some very intimidating and very capable municipal officials, and we would be foolhardy if we were, as the Provincial Treasury, trying to lecture some of the very experienced municipal finance officials, etc., in the province. So we try through our CFO forums, etc., to create platforms where we share information and they can share with one another. I will also just note that in many cases, municipal officials are also better remunerated than provincial officials. I know in my own unit, we struggle to retain staff who move to municipalities, the metro, and some of the other municipalities in the province. So I don't want to leave the committee with the impression that we think of local government as a tier below the province. They're very much a sphere, very much our equals, or in some cases, we're very differential to them. So bringing me to the IYM assessments that we do deliver to municipalities. So Honourable Seleko, we submit IYM assessment reports, budget assessment reports, etc., commentary, advice to municipalities. As we noted, they don't have to take that advice. In some cases, they will tell us very loudly that they have very good reasons for not doing that, and sometimes we respect that more than others. We will, but as the head of the Treasury highlighted in telling me that I should talk to our early warning system. We use the IYM process both to give feedback to individual municipalities, but also in our monitoring and oversight role to manage the risk in the portfolio of municipalities. And we do that. We've kind of refined over the last year or two a set of high frequency indicators. So we track from that in our monthly IYM reports, what we refer to as a watch list of municipalities. And we see how many of those indicators municipalities are triggering. And as they move up that ranking, then we respond appropriately. So we're not going to respond, you know, so if there are well-capacitated municipalities that, you know, we will have obviously fewer comments on their IYM. And if they take some but not all, we're kind of fine with that. Where there are municipalities that are higher on our watch list and they're not taking our advice, where we will probably have far more extensive advice, then we escalate through a series of engagements and letters. And ultimately, that watch list can result, you know, based on that high frequency monitoring of the risks, then we also monitor municipalities against the triggers for formal interventions in section 138 and 140 of the MFMA. We also, to refer to the earlier answer, we work closely with the Department of Local Government because there are other forms of, you know, there are other challenges that aren't in the finance field, and we try to share information both ways between the two departments. But to come to your question on the intervention in Kannaland and the process around that, I've got the slide in front of me that I was presenting on this to the Portfolio Committee in the National Parliament on Tuesday, because they had a hearing on Kannaland there. So we've been for a while, they've been on our watch list, Kannaland. We tested them against the triggers in section 140 of the MFMA. By about the middle of last year, we were concerned that they were potentially in breach of those conditions for an intervention. At that point, MEC Bradell, so again, referring to that MOU, MEC Bradell then wrote to the municipality in terms of Section 136 of the MFMA, which requires that the province establish the facts. And there was then an extensive back and forth in that 136 process in which the municipality responded. We asked follow-up questions, etc. And by late last year, we were at a point where we were satisfied that the municipality could not prove that they did not trigger those triggers for an intervention. And then we went to cabinet, to the provincial cabinet, the provincial executive, in terms of the MFMA, and recommended that at this point a mandatory intervention in terms of 139.5 of the Constitution was needed. The provincial executive approved that on the 13th of December. On the 14th of December, the MEC for Finance then wrote to all of the stakeholders stipulated in the MFMA to notify of an intervention, which includes the National Minister of COGTA, SALGA, the National Council of Provinces Speaker, chairperson, sorry, and the Speaker of the Western Cape Legislature. We don't tell any of those stakeholders where to forward those letters on to. We then also on that same day, the MEC wrote to the National Minister of Finance, because only the National Treasury's Municipal Financial Recovery Service can prepare a financial recovery plan in terms of the MFMA. So they have started that process. And in fact, this afternoon, we have a meeting to discuss their status quo assessment that is part of that regulated process to develop the FRP. And then lastly, if I can touch on the question around the Eskom debt relief, we are very pleased to report that at this stage, all 4 of our municipalities that were eligible applied for debt relief, and their applications were approved. They have 2 of them started from July and 2 from August, so they have respectively 6 or 7 months of reporting on the system. Just to recap for the committee's benefit, the debt relief conditions provide that if municipalities comply with the conditions of the program, and there are 41 conditions that they must report on monthly, if they comply with those conditions, their arrear debt to Eskom will be written off over a period of 3 years, with a third of the debt written off after the end of each 12-month period of successful completion. So at this stage, no one has had any debts written off. But we're pleased to say that at the 6/7 month mark, depending on the municipality, they're all compliant. And we monitor that very closely with the National Treasury colleagues. The design of the process of that program with that third debt write-off is, I think, has exactly your concern in mind, that we don't want to see a regression. So you must prove that you're able to sustain your performance over a 3-year period to get the full debt written off. And those 41 conditions, I think they were much more onerous than people expected. I won't try and go through all 41, but I will just say that a lot of them require the implementation of debt management best practices and revenue collection best practices. So not all of them are immediately implementable, but over the course of the 3 years, if a municipality gets through the process, they will have had to have implemented all of those best practices, and they will have had to maintain their payments to Eskom on their current account over the 3 years. So it is. I think it's about as good as we could have hoped for in terms of making sure that people do implement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HT and chair members. I'm going to combine 2 questions. Mem Kontlo, we were talking about the fiscal futures. Part of what we have experienced in this year's budget process is the extreme volatility of the national budget process that stems not only from various parameters at the national level, but also stems from increasing volatility in the macroeconomic and global environment that is being funneled down through the fiscal system. So with that, as a province, you essentially wait and catch your allocation letter. And so the intention 5 years ago with the launch of the Fiscal Futures Rule is to look at a provincial version of what National Treasury has, is a 10-year view that enables you to start looking at what is happening from your national envelope. So there is a national module on the fiscal futures and it's just been completed. The teams were just trained last week in this respect. So it takes a national view of what is happening at the national model, and that also includes a modeling of the debt dynamics. So which is quite critical. And then it takes down into a provincial module, which is the provincial equitable share and conditional grants, and looks at if we were to continue along the path, where would be going? Then from the drivers, you would see the drivers of education, health, and infrastructure in the main, so that we're able to see what the demand is, what the expenditure requirement is, and where we are being squeezed. So it enables us to take a 10-year view. Most importantly is that the Western Cape has been financing its infrastructure from its asset financing reserve in the main, as well as conditional grants and additional top-up of the PERS. What we can see is that those reserves don't last forever. So it creates a nice warning light. You can't use savings forever. They will run into red at this point, okay, unless you do something differently. It enables us to start approaching, instead of just waiting to catch our allocation letter, it enables us to start approaching the fiscal strategies that are in the budget a lot more proactively, saying this is our predetermined path unless there is any change. And it puts on the table quite critically that we cannot only look at the public purse for financing. South Africa has very deep financial markets, and there is a wealth of capital that is looking to finance infrastructure on positive returns. And so this is the blended financing approach. And blended financing is a catch-all term that really looks at how you combine donor financing, development finance, institution financing, and government financing to lever up and scale spend as well as attract private sector capital. As noted, we have very deep financial markets with and sophisticated with a pension fund industry that is not keen to be targeted for Regulation 28, but is looking to land and utilize capital productively. So in collaboration with the World Bank through a technical assistant trust fund agreement, through the Sustainable Finance Trust Fund Agreement, which is financed by Swiss development agency SECO, we are exploring various ways of looking at a blended financing risk sharing platform that combines donor, development finance, institution, multilateral, and government in a structure that essentially utilizes the cutting edge of financial innovation in the development finance institution market, which is not only going to lend. It's looking at how you can use guarantees, and particularly partial guarantees, that essentially reduce the cost of financing to projects. So if you would, if you had anywhere from any of the DFIs that are AAA rated or the multilaterals and that applied a partial credit guarantee, your cost of financing would reduce. And so we're looking at this in the infrastructure sectors that are applicable in province. So it's not only energy, which is in the municipal space. It's also in collaboration with STIDF, the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Finance Facility that is working through our colleagues at DLG in the municipal water and sanitation sector, looking at how we buttress up the BFI application and the rapid school build and into the Tygerberg PPP as that moves into a procurement phase. So it is incredibly exciting work. The work is being done in conjunction with National, and we have not overly shared because there is quite sensitive explorations as to whether this would be a structure across National that is then applied into deals at a provincial level, so as not to overly duplicate. So we are approaching this in a very step-by-step transitional manner. The World Bank team is looking at a financial and a legal due diligence approach and a due diligence with DFIs, and will be commissioning that. So there is no funding from the Western Cape government that is going into this point, and a concept has not been brought to the executive as yet. But it is clear that it is incredibly exciting and that it starts to lever in private sector capital in very innovative ways, and is the approach, a modality that has been explored in the development aid approach in the global world. Thank you.
I think last but not least, the question on the operating leases within Program 1. We just entered into a new agreement with a service provider for our what we call BIS hubs or photocopier machines. So that's for a period of 54 months, and it's linked to a CETA contract. For the first 3 years, we pay for the rental of the machines, and thereafter we only pay for the number of copies that you will make. So remember, you will also see that in the last year of the MTEF, it reduces again, because then we only pay for because for that period in that financial year for the lease. So, but the lease for all the photocopy machines within the provincial treasury falls under Program 1, so it's centralized. So we pay for all. Thanks.
Apologies. All right. With that, I see Member van der Westhuizen would like to
I
make.
didn't hear the response to the State Information Technology Agency and its work in the Western Cape.
Okay, we'll hand back.
Respond. I think the Department of the Premier also recently did a presentation on CETA. I'm not sure which standing committee it was, but we forming part of that process with the Department of Premier trying to address the CETA issue. One of the initiatives that we've taken previously from a provincial treasury side is to highlight this with the Office of the Chief Procurement Office, because it's mostly from a procurement side. Although there was promises to look at the legislation, I think the Office of the Chief Procurement Office sits with their own challenges, particularly some of the bills is concerned, and not a lot is happening on actually trying to streamline the procurement processes as far as CETA is concerned. So we're part of the group that having discussions with the CETA board. So what has happened is they have appointed a special ministerial task team to actually look at the services that CETA rendered. And recently they had a discussion with ourselves in the province where we've highlighted all of the issues and the problems that we experienced with CETA. In particular, one of the issues was the change of CEOs over the last 15 years. I think they've got 24 CEOs. So when that happens, there is a change in the approach as far as CETA is concerned. So that is a major bugbear. So we have put all of the issues with the ministerial task team, and in particular the issue that you raised on the education side in terms of our dissatisfaction with the approach, the fact that we were just informed after we have concluded the contract, and they found there were some irregularities on their side. So all those issues is it's now with the special task team that the minister have identified, the national minister, to turn around SITA, and they've also recently appointed a new acting CEO. So it's still going to take some time, because SITA have become, over these years, I think 15 years, quite a big animal. And one of the problems is that they were supposed to drive regulations for the IT industry, but they've also become a provider. So this regulator and become a provider, that the conflict between that. So they, of course, tried to do as much as possible by themselves, whilst we've got other industry role players that's also in that particular market. So that's hopefully one of the issues that the new board will address in terms of how to turn around SITA. But it is the SITA, the procurement, the ICT procurement has been a bugbear for every department in this province for quite a couple of years. Thank you.
All right, with that, we would like to thank you sincerely for answering all of our questions. We know we had quite a lot to ask today, but we had the same energy that you brought here today. So we were trying to match that, of course. But thank you again for coming through. Please help yourself to some of the refreshments that we've put out. And yeah, you're excused. Thank you.
Chair.
Do members want to take a break now? 5 minutes is always 10 minutes, but okay, 5 minutes. Okay, babe. Yeah, let's do it quickly.
Oh, no.
Chair, I propose that we support the vote. Chair,